All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Town of Riverhead Industrial Development Agency Board meeting on July 17th, 2023, 5:01 p.m. And I would like to note that the board is fully here, so we have a quorum, and I would like to ask the board to consider the agenda, and...
I'll make that motion to consider the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now, I would like to suggest, in the context of the agenda, that we move the executive director's report just to the top right now, before we call the public hearing.
Okay, I'll move that motion.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so, Tracy, could you provide your executive director's report?
First, I'd like to introduce counsel from Nixon Peabody. He usually joins us by Zoom, Terrence Walsh. And, all right, so Heatherwood Luxury Rentals, in partnership with Metro Group in Ornstein, they've come before us before. They have submitted a draft application and is anticipated to be on the agenda for August to consider accepting the application for review. There's an application out to Tomcat Realty for an expansion project for Eastern Wholesale Fence, which is one of our bond projects. An update on EPCAL is that the project listing for the CAT application that is on our website has been updated to reflect some progress on the application as of 6/13/23. Updates to the tentative approval process were made, and we added an interpretation of zoning and uses memo. Council has engaged the agency and has met with real estate valuation consulting firm. Discussions have been ongoing with regard to responding to due diligence letters. Phillips Lytle has been working with an accounting firm that specializes in investigative and forensic accounting, and a letter went out today with what will be a final documents request. Additionally, like everyone else here, we all read the letter submitted to the local media outlets by Justin Jermasian, within which he stated that there will be no cargo jet port in their proposed development plan. And importantly, where he states that CAT will continue to work with the town to create a plan for a project that is consistent with the town's vision for EPCAL and in compliance with the adopted studies and regulations that govern its use. We look forward to presenting our development plan at a future public hearing when we seek the required town approvals for the development plan of EPCAL. The agency is anxious to hear from CAT concerning the contemplated project, and as such, the agency will be directing CAT to appear before the board for a public information session so that the agency and the public can get a more detailed understanding of its proposed project. We'll be scheduling several information sessions within the next few weeks for further consideration and for the benefit of the public to hear about the plans and comment on them. This matter is not on the agenda for this evening, and there will be no discussion about it tonight. Our new computer is in. It was set up this past week, so anticipate some hiccups. Right now, the hiccups with email and email addresses and some minor stuff, but it went rather seamlessly, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed. The state comptroller sent the annual follow-up that they have received our Paris report. They had some questions on a few of the entries, and we're working to respond to them, and this is a typical annual exercise. And then we may look to move the August scheduled meeting from the 7th to the 14th to accommodate some information session times. I'm working on that and dates and times, but right now it is still the 7th. Should be determined this week though. And I participated in an Empire State Development webinar regarding small business credit initiative. I did send you the flyers if you knew anybody that could use the information. They were sent along to the chamber and the bid and companies. And that's my report, sir.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
No? Thank you.
All right, fine. Then what I'd like to do now is I'd like to, what's the term I'd like to,
Open the public hearing.
but I want to put this meeting on hold our current meeting?
With the recess?
No, it's not recessed.
I just go into the public hearing?
just go
Okay.
into
Just going into a public hearing.
Then I'd like to basically turn to the public hearing, and we are here this evening to accept public comment in connection with a successful challenge brought against the Riverhead Board of Assessors assessment of the facility in a tax certiorari proceeding, and by court order dated April 11, 2023, on behalf of Browning Hotel Properties. I have on file an affidavit certifying the publication of the following notice of public hearing in the July 6, 2023 issue of the Newsday. I make the notice of public hearing and the resolution calling said hearing a part of the record of this proceeding of Browning Hotel Properties. Further, I make a part of the record of this proceeding the affidavit of Tracy Stark James, as Executive Director of the Riverhead Industrial Development Agency, attesting to the service of the notice of public hearing in this matter upon the chief fiscal officers of the affected jurisdictions as required by the laws of the state of New York. Will council please provide us with a synopsis of the court order and proposed action to be taken by the agency?
Sure, I can provide some background. So this pilot, like a lot of the IDA's pilots, is a formula-based pilot that's based on the actual assessed value of the property. And back, I believe it was 2015, phase 2 of this pilot closed, and at that time, the assessed value of the facility was $5,054,000, and that was the value that was used in the pilot schedule. As the chair referenced, Browning brought a tax certiorari claim challenging that assessment. They were successful, and the assessed value was reduced from $5,054,000 to $3,739,086, a reduction of about $1.3 million. And so both the court order that the chair referenced and the pilot agreement that governs this facility says two things have to happen. One, and just to go back 1 second, that the assessed value has changed retroactively going back to the 2020-21 tax year and going forward. So that's the past 3 years preceding the current tax year. And so we have to do two things now for both the pilot agreement and the court order. One of them is to grant a credit to Browning to use that they can apply towards future pilot bills and the amount that they overpaid in the previous 3 years. And that's because if this property was on the tax rolls, Browning would just get a refund for the amount they overpaid. But because it's off the tax rolls, the tax jurisdictions won't give them a refund, and the IDA also won't give them a refund. And so in lieu of that, they get a credit to apply towards future payments. And then the second thing that has to happen is that the pilot agreement gets amended so that going forward, the pilots are calculated based on the revised reduced tax assessment. And so that's the action that's going to be before the board, and this public hearing is being held as a prerequisite under the IDA Act in order to effectuate that amendment.
Okay. Any questions? I'll ask a silly question. Could you just explain perhaps a little bit as to how this assessment got changed? It's under a formula method, so that means it was a net income driven analysis originally?
That's a good question. I'm not a tax certiorari
Okay.
lawyer. I don't know, Bill, if you have any insight on
No,
that.
so we actually went back to their tax certiorari lawyer and said, okay, now that this assessment has been reduced, how does that translate into actual dollars that should be billed going forward, and how much of a credit was owed? And they gave us, we went back and forth with them, and Tracy had the agency CFO verify those numbers so that we know with the new revised pilot how much the pilot payments will be going forward, taking into account the very large credit that they're owed. And so this is one, and it was applied against both hotels
Okay.
on a basically pro rata basis, or is it?
Well, it applies to the second phase pilot.
Yeah.
So the tertiary action was only on the second phase
Well, it's on one piece of property.
property? Okay,
But
Two-
the
two.
pilot agreement
covers,
for relative to these years dating back is on the second phase. So the current pilot agreement applies to the second phase.
okay.
So
And there's
they-
no current pilots being accepted anymore on phase 1, right? That's completely
No,
on?
it's totally on the tax roll.
That's totally on
Well,
the
no,
tax.
it's still under
Well-
a pilot. It's still under a pilot. It's paying an amount equal to 100% of
The
taxes.
taxes,
Right.
okay.
Right.
So
that's-
I guess the question is, curious why we're having a public hearing, because I would think that we're not increasing their
No,
benefits at all.
well, in essence, you're reducing the amount that they owed because of the credit we have to give.
Right.
Because of the erroneous tax.
Right,
So-
but
so-
moving forward, the formula will be based on a lower number, so the
Lower.
benefits will be lower moving forward.
Correct, yeah.
For the balance, which is only several years, right,
Yes,
left on
correct.
their
And-
pilot
and
agreement?
if you recall, last year, the board approved, basically, the company has already had started proceeding with the town to subdivide that property, so it'd be two separate tax lots.
Okay, yes.
And we had approved doing that, and we actually had to sign some of the documents that they submitted to the town. That was in the process of happening when Lee Browning, the president, died in December. And so when last I spoke to Charles Cuddy, his attorney, he said that was still, as far as he knew, was still pending before the town. So at some point, what we will do is separate that lot into two separate leases, terminate one of them, and keep the lease going on the newer hotel. But that, unfortunately, his premature death impacted that, which was a shame. He's a true gentleman.
As a reminder, it's our practice to get an estimated assessment prior to the build-out from the town assessor's office. Up until most recently, they've been rather cooperative, and they do provide that for us. We also have the clients get an estimated assessment as well. So we try to cover that base as much as we can, and unfortunately,
So this is an administrative requirement that
Yeah.
needs to occur because we need to go back and
well, the
amend
taxing-
the existing,
Retroactively give them a
and
credit
to give
for
them
what
a
they
credit
overpaid.
toward, right?
So the pilot estimates that the school and fire and everybody will be receiving will change going forward.
Right.
Okay, other questions from the board? Any questions from the audience? This is with respect to Browning Hotel Properties and the modification of their pilot payments. If you're going to make a comment, sir, please step up to the mic and...
Testing. Name and address. Now he's gonna kill me.
Hi, my name is Paul Thompson, 7 Black Pine Street in Calverton. It was my understanding that they were going to change the Long Island Expressway to go to a traffic light so you can go either east or west. What happened to that?
I'm sorry, sir, this is a public hearing on Browning Hotel Properties?
Browning Hotel Properties had promised the IDA
Yeah.
that they would change the Long Island Expressway to be straight into a traffic light, and at that point, you can travel east or west, whereas now, you only can go east. And they would promise that they were going to do the construction, and it would be their cost. What happened to that?
This matter predates me, I'm going to have to refer to Tracy.
I'll check into that, Paul. I'll have to check with the town to see what happened with their approvals, and I'm sure it's got something to do with the state and not local.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Any other questions on the particular matter? Well, if that's the case, then I would like to declare, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there.
Or I didn't walk fast enough. I'm Ashley Pope. I'm counsel for the Riverhead Central School District. Just a question about the credit. If I heard you correctly, it's a formula-based pilot based on the assessed value of the property, so a percentage of taxes that would otherwise be due on that valuation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So
Okay.
it's based on the assessed value and a percentage of the assessed value,
Yeah.
there'll be a reduction.
Okay. Which tax year are you planning to provide the credit in? This coming tax year?
This upcoming, we're mandated to do that.
Okay. So we do thank y'all for providing a notice of tonight's public hearing to the school district. But given where the school district is in its budget and tax levy time, you know, the district's is required by law, to, like every other school district, to account for pilots receivable and estimated pilots in calculating its tax levy limit calculation, which the district did. And am I correct, this is about a $500,000 pilot to the school district? District records reflect that. I don't want to assume that's the same.
Hang on one sec.
Sure.
I think I can answer that question.
It's 500 and change.
His original assessment, amount of reduction, total assessment.
So that I don't give an incorrect number here. This was last year, and this was their amount provided. So last year, I believe you received $491,000 on this pilot,
Okay, we had an estimate of 508, so that sounds about right.
okay?
Okay.
Going forward, it will be significantly less.
Do we know what the total amount of the credit to be provided is pursuant to the court order?
I do. The credit for the 3 years in total is $521,774.
So effectively, there will be no pilot payment in 23-24?
That's not completely accurate.
Okay. For, based,
We're going to
to
provide you with
recover.
estimates like we do every year, probably in August. We just don't want to jump the gun ahead of, so.
Actually, that's a question. Is that credit front, Bill, is that credit front-loaded or is it allocated?
It's gotta
I bet it has to be front-loaded, right?
happen. Yeah.
Front.
So,
Right.
According from the judge.
yeah,
That was his decision.
so my guess is, that's what I'm gonna say, so my guess is that basically if it's front-loaded in terms of
Yeah, so here's-
a credit, that it would probably reduce the next pilot payment almost in its entirety.
Correct.
And then,
For the next year.
Let me just correct, there are other taxing jurisdictions
Yeah.
that this gets separated between, so
Sure.
the total
Okay.
500 doesn't get taken from the school.
that's true,
Okay.
that's correct, thank
But
you, Tracy.
a large chunk, at least, we can safe to assume, based on that
Probably
total credit.
60%.
and- Yeah, okay.
Back to them, how
Thank
do
you.
the allocation.
I do have estimates on, I'll provide you.
Okay, I mean, and that would be helpful, because this is unfortunately the first that the district is hearing about this, and we calculate the tax levy limit in March and give that to the state by March 1st. We put our budget out to voters in May. It was approved in May using the estimated pilots that we expected to receive for this, you know, roughly 500,000. And now we're looking at an unexpected reduction due to the credit that might take away almost all of that pilot, and that puts the district in a bad spot. And because then we're faced with, where does that additional revenue come from to meet the requirements of the budget?
Absolutely. But, you know, this is a court order for us. And otherwise, in other cases, for instance, John Wesley, that would be a refund from the county.
Sure.
And it would be put onto the local taxpayers. In this case, we actually, it's probably a better case scenario that it's coming from the pilot.
According to the tax court order, and I'll give you a copy of this, it is ordered that in the event that the credit exceeds the entire pilot bill and statement for the aforementioned next year, then such excess credit shall be applied in full to the
Right.
successive tax years. So basically, it's going to be spread out over a couple of years.
And I believe that the court order was made the end of April, beginning of May, so it was unfortunate timing for a lot
10th
of
of April.
taxing jurisdictions.
April
I'm
10th.
sure. April 10th.
Now, the court order you're referring to, that's the court order approving a stipulated settlement, right? So I actually pulled it, thank you. So it was a negotiated settlement that was court ordered. Yes.
Which we weren't a party of.
Okay. So you can, I mean, I don't want to bore y'all with tax cap law, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. But, you know, the district didn't, as far as district records reflect, did not get notice of this proceeding, was not made a party to the tax certiorari proceeding, was not notified that there was a potential settlement that would serve to reduce the pilots that the district would expect to receive, and didn't get a copy of the April 2023 settlement. Really, tonight is the first time that, and the public hearing notice, which was received on July 11th for the district by mail, this is the first time that really we're hearing about this, and now we're faced with that potential significant shortfall for the 23-24 school year. There's, I know you mentioned that it's not a tax certiorari tax refund case. Well, there's the Suffolk County Tax Act, which the intent of that is to make the school district whole and really insulate the school district from the financial liability for refunds from tax certiorari proceedings, granted tax refunds, but there's also case law applying that to pilots, and including from the Court of Appeals, which is New York State's highest court. So I would note the significant financial impact here, and particularly the timing, which is a huge concern. And perhaps there's a way to have a discussion about that to try to resolve that, and it doesn't certainly have to be in this forum, but that is a significant concern.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
None of us.
I don't think so.
The only thing I'd like to point out is that the IDA wasn't a party to the proceeding either.
Any further comments from the public? And if not, then I will declare this hearing closed at 5:24 p.m. That now takes us to the next item on our agenda, which is a presentation from the related companies.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Schoberg. I'm here on behalf of Related Affordable. This is Dave Pearson, also here from Related Affordable. We're here to discuss River Point Apartments, which is located across the street from this meeting. This is an existing affordable housing property, 135 units, 9 buildings. It was built in 1961, and Related has been involved with the property since 1979. Our old records, way before I was even alive, indicate that we were encouraged to actually buy the property out of foreclosure. The property was last renovated in 2008. It's an IDA project. It received an allocation of approximately $9.5 million of bonds, and that facilitated a roughly $1.8 million renovation. We're now proposing to acquire the project with an affiliated entity of Related. So Related would be on the buyer and seller, and undertake a very transformative renovation to the tune of $12 million. Like I said, the project is an existing tax credit and Section 8 project. Residents pay based on their income, their rent, 30% of their income as rent. So the residents would not see an increase in rent based on the proposed project, even though the project is getting significant capital investment. From the IDA, we are seeking an allocation of bonds in the estimated amount of $32 million. That obviously is changing all the time with interest rates and construction costs. We're also seeking a pilot. The project does not currently have a pilot. It pays market taxes. We are seeking to enter into a shelter rent pilot where actually our projection for first-year taxes would increase somewhat significantly from around $320,000 last year to $390,000 in our underwriting. And that would continue to increase as the property's income or rents increase over time. Again, the renovation would be extensive. We'd be in interiors, doing cabinets, counters, baths, flooring, painting, upgrading fixtures to LED. The structure of the building would be improved, roofs, windows, boilers. There's some structural issues on one of the buildings that would be shored up. So very extensive renovation. Aside from the physical aspect, we would also be looking to engage. We have a nonprofit foundation that is putting out dollars in the communities in which we work and do projects. So we're already reaching out to folks in the town to see who we can get involved with. Some that have come up are Island Harvest. We are going to be very active in National Night Out in a couple of weeks. And other organizations within the town as well. Just some other facts about the project. There are 5 full-time employees there, 2 in the office, a community manager, and a security director. There are 3 on the maintenance staff. The average payroll for those folks, and they're all residents of Suffolk County, the total payroll is around $330,000. And then also with the big construction project, we are estimating around 50 construction jobs during the period of around a year to complete the renovations, with an average wage of around $45 per hour. We'd be looking to use local resources. Our surveyor, for example, is a Riverhead organization. We've already started to do a little bit of construction there to facilitate some of the future upgrades. So we've had pavers and some other folks within Riverhead working at our site. And we'd be looking to use as much local labor as possible. We'd like to keep the dollars within the community.
I think we can potentially pause there and open it up for any questions. I think just a little bit about Related Affordable. I'm an executive vice president there. We focus on the preservation of existing affordable housing, but also in ensuring that it's brought up to current modern standards. Heavy emphasis, depending on the project, on security infrastructure upgrades, some of which you may have already seen the start of with some new access controls there at the property. We've had a number of conversations with some individuals at the town of Riverhead over the last 6 or so months, soliciting feedback on things that we can do to improve improve the property for the residents, but also working very closely with the police department to make the security upgrades. And the director of security is a relatively recent new hire that is there on site every day to communicate with the PD, work with the residents, and really try to make positive improvements there at that property. Our architect has been in with planning for one meeting so far for an initial sort of review of the proposed renovations. There'll be a big emphasis on sort of the street-facing facade and improving the appearance and the aesthetics of the property. It's obviously dated, and so we're looking to really make a really impactful improvement to the aesthetics as you drive by the property. I think that so far all the feedback that we've gotten has been really constructive, really helpful. I think that the folks that have been involved in those would say that we've been very responsive to the requests that we've received to date, and we look forward to this sort of next step of being able to bring the really large transformative rehab to the property so that we can ensure that one, River Point Apartments stays as affordable housing for the residents, but also really in a much improved both for the community and for the residents that live there.
Anyone have a question?
I have a question, more questions. Under your pro formas, under the expenses, I see you have 3% for administrative expenses, and I'm sure that's a typo there. It looks to be a 3% management fee. Can you tell me the difference between the admin and the management expenses?
Yeah, sure, I'll take this one. So the admin is really things like running the office, ordering reams of paper, paying for internet and TV, things of that nature, renting expenses like marketing, getting up on apartments.com or what have you. The management fee goes to pay the management company. In this case, we have a captive management company called Related Management Company. They work on a fee basis, which is a percentage of the revenue. They can also work on a fixed per unit per month fee. I think right now we're on a revenue share. We would be moving to a fixed per unit per month, and then we have trended that expense over time at 3%. So it's not a 3% of the revenue, but it's escalating over time at 3%.
There's the same people doing both jobs, though. Well, let me ask the question. Are there separate people doing the administrative tasks and the management tasks, or are they the same people?
There,
I can answer that. So, yeah, I think there's the people that are on site, right? And their payroll gets passed through directly as a project cost that is paid for by the owner. Then the management fee covers really the whole back office infrastructure of the management company. So they have a whole compliance department that focuses on staying in compliance with tax-exempt bond programs, low-income housing tax credit programs, the Section 8 program, et cetera. A facilities team that comes in, so it's like the regional level of the management company is what is sort of captured within that, that management fee. So the site staff is there, but there's also a sort of a backbone behind them that is covered by the management company, and that's what that fee pays for.
You mentioned that the Director of Security is a recent hire, yet everyone knows that there's been an issue with crime over at the facility for many, many years. Can I ask you why it took so many years to put a Director of Security in place over there?
Yes, yes, you can. We have hired off-duty, excuse me, not off-duty, but security companies, like third-party security vendors over the years, but didn't have sort of a dedicated person, and it's relatively a new role within our company that we have really identified a need for. Over the history, we've often had, the property manager that's there on site coordinating with third-party vendor security companies to ensure that there's, adequate security on site. I'd say as a result of COVID and a lot of what happened through, one, not being able to sort of get into units on a regular basis because that was all suspended for quite a while, and then really the sort of prohibition on evictions for a very long time for really any reason, sort of put this property, behind the 8 ball. I think that this property is sort of over the years, and Sam and I haven't been involved personally with the property for a very long time, but over the years has sort of gone through these ups and downs where we are able to have really great residents, get things under control, and then there's a bad element that occurs, and if you're not on top of it, sort of right off the bat, things can go downhill pretty quickly. So that was part of the reason our first meeting that we had maybe a year ago was with Chief Edgar Miller and the police department to really understand what were the current issues, what were they seeing on the grounds, how can we what are the things that we can do to try to mitigate those issues, and then really create this sort of better working relationship so that we can hopefully cut down on calls to the police department, or at least make those calls to the police department effective and being able to reduce the bad elements. So I'd say it's a sort of long-winded way to say we are shifting approach both as a company and particularly at this property from just having third-party vendors to now having like a dedicated staff member that's a former NYPD officer that is on site daily.
The reason why I ask is I understand you have a duty to be responsive to your tenants. Refrigerator breaks, air conditioner breaks, things like that, you have to go and have them fixed. I think you also have a duty to the community to make sure that you're running the facility in a way that not only is beneficial for the tenants, but also protects the community. I think you guys were kind of behind the 8 ball in doing that, so.
And I wouldn't disagree with that analysis that we're behind the 8 ball in doing it. I think when Sam and I got involved, we realized pretty quickly that there was more that needed to be done. We've put a bunch of new resources behind that to right the ship, if you will. And it's not something that's job done. There's a lot more work to do. I think we were over there earlier today, and the access controls and the gates and the new house rules that we've implemented, and really sort of working closely with the residents. We have, I'd say 98% of the residents there are really, fantastic residents. It's a lot of the element that was coming off-site, friends and whatever, you know, that were causing a lot of problems. It became a little bit of a hangout at nighttime, and that's, you know, really where we focused our effort on making it not the place to come hang out, and having it be, you know, a safe place for our residents to live.
Just one question. You have these lovely residents there. This is a pretty big project. Are they all going to get displaced temporarily, or what's happening there? How's that getting done?
Yeah, so it's 135 units. The renovation will happen sort of over the course of about 12 months. And what we sort of handle renovations two different ways. I think here what we'll do is, if to the extent we have vacant units, we'll set those up as sort of like on-site hotel units, if you will. So while the work goes on in a residence unit, which is typically between 1 to 2 weeks, they'll have, you know, they'll be relocated temporarily into this other unit and then go back when their unit is done. Otherwise, we look to identify hotels in the neighborhood, and we hire a dedicated relocation specialist, a third party, that does things like communicate with the post office to make sure any medications are, you know, coming along, and work with the school district if we need to get a bus route changed to pick up kids at a hotel that's nearby, or otherwise figure out ways to make sure there's transportation for the kids that are going to school. And so that's the way that we sort of approach it. I think as our renovation scope gets more finalized after several more meetings with the planning department, and then we get a sort of real firm date, we'll really fine tune those plans. There'll also be some, you know, work that can happen while the tenants are actually, like, you know, during the course of the day while the tenants are still in their unit. We will set up a hospitality unit hospitality space in the community room where residents can go for the day if they're, you know, not at work or school, and work can go on in their unit and then be returned at the end of the day back to them. So it's a whole logistics process that we work through. But nobody will be permanently displaced, and everybody will be able to come back to their unit, and any of the costs associated with relocation is all borne by us.
Typically, do you have much turnover when you do this sort of a thing then?
Not typically, because they're mostly excited for the new renovation
Sure,
and
they want to
new
move back,
units.
yeah.
You know, I think it gives us an opportunity to re-get into every unit and make sure that everybody that is in that unit is on the lease and note any house rule violations and that sort of stuff. So there, you know, could be some turnover as a result of that, but it'd be very, very minimal.
Any other questions?
Can you clarify the ownership situation for me, and if any of the principals are changing, or it was hard to decipher from the the application itself, so.
Sure. So the property's general partner, it's owned by a partnership right now. The property's general partner is Related Companies Incorporated.
Okay.
That will be the general partner in the new ownership.
Okay.
The way that the low-income housing tax credit program and the tax exempt bond program works is that there can't be ownership of greater than 50% on the sell side and the buy side. So we'll have a new low-income housing tax credit investor, which is typically a bank, buys the low-income housing tax credits. They're actually admitted into the partnership as a member.
Okay.
So that will sort of solve that problem, and then there'll be some other individuals and entities that are either employees of the company or affiliated with Related that will sort of fill in the remainder of the ownership.
Let me just see. On page 10, I didn't bring my copy of the application with me, but on page 10, we ask about equity percent, and you provide ownership percent. So I'm hoping that we can get that addressed before the final. No, their physical application.
Yeah, this was just accepting the application,
Application,
so
yes.
we're still going to have a public hearing, and you'll be provided more. I
Yeah.
gave you the basic overview of the
Yeah,
application.
I just noticed it, so I thought
Sure.
I'd bring it up. And then my final question is with regard to your reference to shelter rent calculations for the pilot. That's a new term for me. I'm wondering if you can kind of explain what your concept is for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pretty common calculation in the low-income housing, or in the affordable housing space. I think, so the state sort of has a program where, based on our revenues, that's generated through the rents, you reduce that by the utilities that the property pays, and then that's sort of your top line number, and then you multiply that by the 10%, which is the shelter rent calculation that we're seeking. I think it's the utilities coming off the revenues that is why it's called shelter rent.
Okay. So is that different than the affordable, the New York State affordable
So the
485?
581?
581?
The 581?
Yes.
Yeah, it's different than that.
It's different
It's
than
different
that.
from that,
And
but it is it's the formula that we typically use when we have tax-exempt bonds and low-income housing tax credits. So it's one that a number of other IDAs use, like the town of Brookhaven uses it, town of Hempstead, Suffolk County IDAs. They've all used the shelter rent. It's pretty common.
so
for
it's
this
equal
stuff.
to the 581? It's
It's another formula,
Okay.
but it's a comparable.
comparable?
type.
Okay.
And the reason it works great for affordable housing in terms of being able to make projects work is because, it sort of provides certainty to the lenders around what the real estate taxes are going to be over time. So the rent, the pilot payments in lieu of taxes sort of increases over time, but it's based on the increases in the revenue that the property is seeing, so that they can, underwrite that amount relatively easily, because we have to do very long-term financing on affordable housing projects because of the compliance periods associated with the tax-exempt bonds and the low-income housing tax credits.
What's the current balance on the outstanding tax-exempt bonds?
I believe it's about nine.
Like around 8.1.
8.1. And are those going to remain outstanding, correct?
Those will be redeemed.
They will be redeemed.
So those will be paid off, and those bonds will
With the
be redeemed.
proceeds of the new bonds?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, from the sale price,
Sale.
from the sale proceeds, it'll be redeemed. So
Just-
it's not, the bonds aren't going to directly redeem the old bonds, but the seller will receive, the purchase price proceeds, then they will make a payoff of the existing bonds. And in order to qualify for the low-income housing tax credits, at least 50% of the overall project has to be financed by new issue tax-exempt bonds. And so that's the formula for how we get to the request on the tax-exempt bonds. It's like one of these cliff tests where if you don't finance at least 50% of it, then you don't get the low-income housing tax credits at all.
Just as a reminder, the IDA holds the bonds for the project currently.
Issued
but-
bonds.
Issued the bonds, and then, but we'll be
Going
closing
forward.
that, and then
what-
LDC, we'll
Yeah.
get into that in the LDC meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so the idea, there are some advantages of having the LDC issue the tax-exempt bonds, so the IDA. LDC is not subject to New York State bond issuance charge, which would be 84 basis points, and the LDC can grant the full mortgage recording tax exemption. So, the idea is that the IDA would do a straight lease transaction and provide sales tax exemptions in the pilot, and the LDC would issue the tax-exempt bonds and provide the mortgage recording tax exemption. And we're currently doing a very similar project with Related right now in Dutchess County up in Hudson Valley, where they're bifurcating it that way.
And I think my final question is with regard to, is there a HUD? Doctor's Path had a situation where the timing of the project was not concurrent with the outstanding agreement with HUD. So I just want to ask the question up front. What is the current term of your agreement with HUD for the project? Or is it similar?
So at closing, so when we close on the bonds and the transfer of the property to the new owner, we'll be entering into a new 20-year contract with HUD.
Okay.
So that's the term that they allow. So that'll be a brand-new renewal contract at that time.
Okay. So we'll have a line.
And the last thing I'll mention on the financing and on the bonds is just that
Yes.
the IDA or the town has no liability associated with the bonds. The bonds
Right.
are issued under a conduit structure. We will likely use Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac as a credit enhancer of those bonds, and they essentially take they take the risk, if you will, the real estate risk.
Right.
And to the extent that a bondholder doesn't get paid by sort of us by a conduit, then Fannie Mae steps in under that credit enhancement and makes that payment. And then obviously comes back after us. But we do a lot of tax-exempt bond deals with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and it's a pretty, what's the right term, commonplace structure. There's like 2 or 3 different loan products that everybody kind of uses in this particular space.
Okay, great.
And there will be both from, the LDC will have a tax regulatory agreement recorded against the property as will HUD. So there'll be restrictions on the use of the property for the 20 years as well as what they can charge in rent. So it is and that's what goes back to what they're talking about having the back office. There's a lot of paperwork to ensure that they're compliance with all those regs, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to consideration of our minutes for the June 2023 meeting. Could I have a motion to...
I'll make a motion.
To accept them?
Yes.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Tracy, some correspondence you want to highlight?
Yeah, we've received miscellaneous correspondence from the community regarding a number of projects that have all been forwarded to your board and put in the file,
Okay.
as well as the Board of Assessors, which you also have.
Yep. Okay. All right. Treasurer's report, Lee?
As of June 30th, 2023, the cash in the checking account was $46,543.38. And the money market account was $45,061.94, with interest earned of $3.70. The project deposit account was replenished. The amount had, I think, gone down to $33,260.50, and it was replenished with $100,000. The account earned interest of $7.07, and as of June 30th, there was $143,072.83 in that account. Revenues for the month of June included agency services billed to the CAT project in the amount of $6,832.50, an administrative fee of $2,500, an application fee of $4,000, and a terminated equipment contract refund of $84.14, and interest earnings of $86.30. The expenses for the month of June totaled $17,569.48. And finally, all second quarter pilots have been collected and dispersed to the taxing jurisdictions. Outstanding amounts totaling $225,000 are related to previously deferred payments from John Wesley Village.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No? All right. Okay, do we need to accept?
Motion?
Yeah, so we need a motion here to accept these report?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Committee reports, we have no committee reports tonight.
Correct.
Okay. We have no old business tonight.
Correct.
New business, we have 2 items. One is to accept an application from Related with respect to the presentation just made to us, and that's Resolution 2723.
I'll make the motion.
You make the motion? Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And then we have the consideration of an amendment to the pilot agreement for the Browning Hotel properties. That's Resolution 2823. Do you have any comments or motion?
Motion.
To accept. And a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. That's the executive director's report. We've done that earlier today. And I would now like to go into executive session to discuss potential litigation that we've been facing. And may I have a motion for that?
A second?
All in favor? Aye. All right, so we'll go into executive session now.
And sir, after we come back from the executive session and close out the IDA meeting, we will go into an LDC meeting.
That's correct.
Yeah.